Okay, so we're back with lesson 13. So last week we worked with some APIs. Let me just pull up my lesson 12. I also fixed the little layout problem I had here, so I'll show you how to fix that. So here was our application as of the end of class last week. We had our little weather widget, we had our reCAPTCHA, and I'm not sure if I've added the comments thread to my, you guys did the world's shortest lab by adding Facebook comments onto your games page. Yeah, I didn't add it into mine. Okay, so this is where we left off. So we were basically focused on consuming APIs created by other developers at other places. So what we want to do this week is we want to build our own API. So what we want to do is we want to make our video game list available in JSON format, so an other application could call our URL on our site and consume our video game list, which we would send back as JSON. So we're going to make two different versions of the API. The first one is so that we're simply going to send back all the information about our video games as a JSON object. The second thing we want to do is we then want to modify our API. So if the user, if our client application specifies the name of a particular game, we'll only send back information about that game. So we're going to basically write two different get methods, a get all or a get a single game based on the name. Okay? And we should be able to do that in one simple PHP page. So the end result, it'll look something like this. So here's, with my movies table, here's my API that generates, or I'm using PHP to generate a JSON object that has all of my movie data. If I grab everything here, and go to a JSON validator online, like this one, I can actually paste it in, and this site will validate whether the JSON is properly formatted or not. So there's my one version, and then my second version is if I want to pass a specific movie title in here. And separate the words with a plus sign. Okay, well, it didn't work. Whoops. It would be title equals. And I only get that one record that happens to match that movie title. So this is what we're going to want to do. We're going to build a separate page to create a games API. We'll get it working where it first shows the whole list. Then if there is a title, a name field specified in the URL, and we find a matching game based on that name, we're going to only show that one video game. And then we'll open up a completely separate application. We can use, probably the easiest thing is to use something like Git Bash, which if you haven't installed in your machines, I'll quickly show you how to do that. And then we can call our API, see how it works. So see, if we make a curl request from our command prompt to this URL, we should see what JSON we get back. Then we could give that URL to any other application, and it would have access to the games in our video game library. It can't do add, edit, and delete, but it can read the list of video games or read a specific game based on the title of that game. Okay? So that's what we want to get working. So we really don't need, I'm going to make a lesson 13 folder for today, and I'll copy all my files from last week. We're really not going to modify any of those files at all. We're going to make our API just as its own file, but at least at the end, everything we've done over the entire course will be in one folder. Okay, so we'll have our app and we'll have our API inside of it. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my folder from last week. And I'll just copy everything. And I'll make a new lesson 13 folder and paste that stuff in. I'm also going to update my htaccess path So it uses lesson 13 for my 404 page. And now I should be able to run everything out of my lesson 13 folder. Oops. So I have an exact copy in my lesson 13. I'll show you how I fixed the footer here. I just had to move the HTML around a little bit to get my, before we had our widget, our footer was kind of shrunken last week, didn't really look right. So I'll show you how we fixed that. So I'm just going to fire up my code editor. I'll open up my folder. We can look at a few of the files. So what all I did was, so here was the code we used for the part on the left. We wrapped that in an 8-column div. Originally, I think I tried putting my weather widget inside of it, another div set of div tags that we created, and that actually broke the formatting. So I removed, this is all the stuff that we just copied and pasted directly from the weather site where we got the widget. When I took out the div at the start and the top, then it fixed my formatting. So if your formatting still is misaligned, just make sure there's no opening and closing div around where it says weather widget start and weather widget end. Those things are just nested right inside the footer tag after our first div. That should fix it. So it now sits inside of the blue footer rather than partly inside and partly underneath it, like we had it last week. So I think last week I had a div tag that opened here, and I was trying to use Bootstrap, so just remove those. And that should fix your widget display in the footer. I'll also update my README file. So we're not going to do anything else with these pages. We're going to leave them as they are, right? There's our kind of completed web application that pretty much includes all of the functionality. If you go back and look at the course outline from first week of the class, we've pretty much covered everything, all the learning objectives of the course, you know. I don't always have a chance with all my classes to get to build an API. It kind of depends how well we do at proceeding through the other stuff, but we have the time to devote to it today, so we'll do a little bit. So what I'm going to do here in my directory tree, we're going to create a page for our games API. But because this API, it's really, I mean, it's related, it's part of our application, but it's not a physical web page that a user is going to load when they're going through here. I'm going to create an API subfolder, and I'll put the file for our JSON API in there. Okay. So inside of here, we already have scripts and uploads. So I'm going to create in my root folder, I'm going to create a new directory, which I will call API. And then I'm going to make a new PHP file in here. So inside of my API folder, I'll right click, choose new PHP file, and I'll call it games. We'll have two files called games.php, the web page that's in our root folder, and then a separate one that's inside of our API folder. So this file is going to be code only. There won't be any HTML. There's no user interface, right? It's just a way for another application to pull data from our website without having direct access into our database. We're using the API to let them see our video game listing instead. So in here, I've got an HTML template. I'm going to take everything out. There should be no HTML in here at all. This is strictly going to be PHP, and we will use PHP to create and return a JSON object. We can put some PHP tags on here. It's been a long time since we've actually written a PHP page from scratch. So we'll do it the way we kind of did it earlier in the class. Let's lay out in comments first all of the steps, all the things we're going to need to do on this page, and then we'll write the code after. So here's what has to happen on this page. What we want, when a user calls our API/games URL, what we want is to display in JSON format all of the games that are in our games table and all of the columns. We want to give them back a copy of all of that data. And we want to display it in JSON format. So then that other application can read that JSON, do whatever they want with it, display it. So, maybe it's a mobile application where they want to display all of the games that we have. So they would, build it in Android Studio, or they'd build it in Xcode for an iPhone. They would, that developer would make their own front end, but somewhere in the back end of their code, they'll do a curl request to our URL so that they can get our data in JSON format. So what things will we have to do here in order to make this work? How are we going to build this page?
Do we need authorization in there?
No, we'll make this public because it's read only, right? They can see the video game list, but they can't change it. There's no way to add, edit, or delete. So we could make it with authorization if we wanted to. We could have a security token, or we could create our own API key for them, for users to have to include, but we'll keep it simple. We'll make it public.
Do we need restart or session access?
We actually won't in this case because it's even simpler than that, because there's no front end user, right?
It include or require some kind of website build.
Sorry?
It will include the games in PHP or the data.
Okay, so where does that data live?
In the front.
Well, the front end presents the data, but the data is not stored here.
Oh, in the database.
Right. So if we're going to need the database, yeah, we won't write the code yet, but obviously we're going to need to connect, right? Because that data lives in our MySQL database. So we're going to need to talk to them. So if we connect, we know somewhere along the line, we're also going to just need to disconnect, right? So those would be two things we need to do. What will happen in between here? If we want to connect to the database, what are we going to do once we're connected?
We'll need to run a SQL statement. We'll also have to.
Yeah, what type of SQL statement are we going to run? What kind of command?
Select.
Right. So just because we're not building an HTML front end, we're just doing it we're just presenting the data in JSON, we're still going to just need to run the query the way we would normally. Connect to the database, set up an SQL query, run it, and store the results, right? All that code will be pretty much identical to what we have here. We won't worry about the keyword searching part of it, right? But all of these features here, prepare the command, execute it, store the result into a variable, we're going to wind up doing all of that stuff on our API as well. Okay. So then we have to do two other things. We now have all of our game data in a PHP array or PHP variable. There's two more steps we're going to need in order that when a user makes a call to our page, this is what they're going to get back, this equivalent. So what were we going to need to do so we can generate that kind of output? Okay, we will need to display. Yeah, that'll be the last thing. You're close, George. Right. We're going to have to convert our PHP array to JSON. Right? How did we do it? So last week we got a JSON object from Google, right, that we needed to convert into a PHP array. What function did we use to take that JSON that Google sent us and convert it into PHP? There was a built-in function that we've used.
Decode.
Right, we use JSON_decode. So we're going to need to do the opposite in our API. We have our information as a PHP object. We need to convert that into JSON. So we're going to use, obviously, we're not, good guess.
Json Encode.
We're going to use Json Encode, convert to JSON. There are our steps. This is going to allow us to build a simple API and give third parties access to our data in JSON format. So this should be fairly straightforward. We can go through it. Connecting is going to be as simple as it always is, right? What do I have to do to connect? Yeah, we'll just require down at the bottom, take our connection variable, create it in db.php, and we'll disconnect.
Rich, I have a question. When I do my assignment too, I just figured that sometimes I use require once, it's just put on my website because sometimes I use it in the header or something else, and I will require the DB again.
Then you can't use require once, you have to use require.
Yeah, but when I build the header or something else, I don't know how many times I will
Then use require rather than require once, because it will be more scalable. So what's our query going to be here? Shouldn't be terribly complicated. That's all we need. We'll select all the rows and all the columns. So any other application can grab our list of games and they can do what they want with it. That will even include the URLs to our game cover images, right? If they want to pull those images off our server, they can, because we're giving them the names of those files. So they could take those cover images and display them in their application. So now we'll create a command and prepare it. Our query has no parameters because we're not passing in any values to our SQL statement. And we just call fetch all. And now we've got a games array with all the rows and columns. I'm just going to load this page in my browser in a second just to make sure there are no errors. We won't see anything because we're not displaying anything on the page. If I get a blank page, that's good. Right? Should mean that the query actually executed without any errors if I get a blank page at this point. That's a really good point. I certainly won't get anything if I don't call execute. So we better execute the query. Thanks, Bison. So now if I try and load my API page, and I'll just do it locally for the moment. So I'll go to API. All right, well, that's good. No, nothing ugly so far. So there's nothing new here. I think by this point, based on everyone's assignment, everybody knows how to connect to the database, run a query, and grab some results. We've done this an awful lot by now. So now I'm going to create a variable. I'll just call it JSON object. And now we want to use the function that George, you mentioned. If we just call Json Encode, and our parameter is, okay, what object do you want to convert to JSON? So what value are we going to supply here as a parameter? What are we converting to JSON? Not the SQL statement. Yeah, the games object that holds all of our data, right? That's our PHP array with our query results, all the game rows and all the columns. So we want to convert that to a JSON object. And then the last thing, Bison, I think you mentioned, is we need to echo it, right? We need to actually send that JSON back to whatever URL is calling our API. Just like Google sent us back our JSON response when we called the reCAPTCHA API. So we just need an echo. But there's no HTML here at all. We just want to send the JSON only. So if I refresh this in the browser now, hopefully what we should get is a list of all of the video game data in our database represented as one JSON object. Let's try it.
It's your DB. You won't find it.
Ah,
You have to.
right, the path, thank you. Because we're in a subfolder, we have to get out of the API subfolder and go up one level. So if I do that, yes, sorry, it is 2 dots. It'll take me up one level and then to my db.php. Thank you. So now when I refresh, there's our JSON object. So we're not going to use this within our own application. However, we could. Let's say our client said, hey, the video game, the website's great. I want a mobile app. I want people to be able to view our video game list in a mobile app. Okay, well, great. All we have to do now is build the mobile app front end. We don't have to write all the code in the mobile app to connect to the database, query the database. We can just call our PHP-based API, and the API feeds all the JSON into our mobile app, which we could then display the data in a mobile application. So if I take this and I'll just verify that it's proper JSON, I'll go to jslint.com, clear out their console. I'll paste it in. Yep, JSON's all good. So we have valid JSON array. It's hard to read like this because it's not broken into separate lines, and everything has quotes around it. It's a little bit hard to read, but that's what the PHP JSON encode is going to generate. Now I'm going to upload this. I want to put this on the web server. I'm going to put it on DreamHost. I know I've been working locally. I'm going to put my stuff up on DreamHost and try it there. And then I want to use my command prompt to call my API remotely and see if I get JSON back. So if you're working locally, I suggest let's actually put our stuff up on the web server today. So I'll create a lesson 13. So I've uploaded everything. I'll update my database file so it's using my live database. So now I'm going to try. Should get the same result in my browser. So I'm going to load my API page and I get JSON. So that's fine. Except realistically, APIs aren't designed to work this way. Users aren't typing them in their browser. They're being consumed by other applications. They're being called the way we called the reCAPTCHA API. We used curl last week. How many of you have Git installed on your computer? Okay. If you have Git, then you already have a command prompt. You already have curl installed, and we can run the curl command that we put in our PHP code. We can actually run it from the Git command prompt. If you don't have Git installed, I want you to do one of two things. If you go into the lesson 13 folder, this won't take long. We're almost done, so we'll take a break shortly. Okay. You could install Git from here, from this link. We'll take you here to the Git homepage. It's not a big deal to install Git, and it's something you're going to need later on. So if you don't have it on your machine, you should have it anyway. And there's different downloads depending if there's any Mac users. Here's the Mac version. I don't think anyone here is running Linux. If you are, here are the Linux tarballs. So install Git. It's not a big download. And in fact, what we can even do, how many of you, who in here has posted code to GitHub before? Some of you have, some of you haven't, kind of. Okay. Next year, when you come back to school, when you're back, sorry, in second year in fall, we're going to be using GitHub basically every week. You know, I put my stuff on GitHub. You guys are, when you submit assignments to me in advanced web programming, you're not going to submit your code on zip and submit your code on Blackboard. All you're going to do is post it on GitHub and send me the link. Here's assignment 1. Here's lab 2. Here's my link on GitHub. You can go see all my code and grab it. Okay. So this is actually a good chance for us to get everybody set up with Git. You have it on your computer, and everybody's going to know how to use it. It's easy. Okay. So you install Git, and once you do, if you open up, go to your programs or your applications on Mac. If you open up Git Bash, it's going to open up a kind of a different version of the command prompt, the Git command prompt. And this will have the curl library already built into it. So we can run curl commands. We can call remote URLs from the command prompt and get responses back. So if we open up Git Bash, and it'll just give me this lovely looking window. So what I want to do is make a curl request to my API, and I want to see if I get JSON in my window. So I'm going to go to my API page online. So this won't work on localhost. You need to put it on the server. Actually, now that I think of it, it probably will work with localhost, even if you have a local server running. So I'm going to copy that URL. And all I have to do here is type curl and then a space. Right click, paste in the URL to my API. Hey, there's all my JSON. So any application now, because we didn't make it secure, right? This API is public. Any application can consume that JSON. A website, a mobile app, a desktop application, anything that needs access to that data. As long as it can read JSON and it knows the URL of my API, it can get that stuff. And that Json Encode will ensure it's properly formatted. We don't have to worry about creating the JSON manually. Json Encode does it. So now this is extremely scalable. We're saying to the world, here's some data in JSON format. Here's an API. Do what you want with it. You want to put it in your application? That's fine. If we wanted to secure it, we could control access. We could set up username and password. We could set up access tokens or keys or whatever we wanted to do. So this is typically the way applications are going to share data using this method. There'll be an API that spits out JSON and other applications can get to it. All they need to do is call the URL, just like we called the reCAPTCHA API last week with curl. We sent it some data, it sent us back JSON. So we've done our own version of this. So what we're going to do, I think we'll take a break here for 10 minutes. When we come back, we're going to make one little change. We're going to do two things. We're going to make one change with our API so that it might spit out all of the games. But if the user supplies the name of a game, we only want to return that one game. Right? So our API might select all. It might select a single record. So we're going to need to check our URL if there is a name value, and if there's a name value, we're going to have to add that onto our SQL query in a where clause. So then instead of getting all the records, it just gets one. So we'll do that, and then we're going to look at how do we put this code on GitHub, right? How do we push this application to Git? Okay, let's take a 10-minute break here.
Quick question for you. Another teacher